Everyone, this is Nikachu, and we are here for the November Decklist and Sideboard guide for Modern Merfolk, and it's going to be, well, it's going to be Simic Merfolk or Tropical Merfolk, because that's just what I'm playing right now. So that is going to be the deck that we are going to go into. We're going to look at the deck. We're going to give you the sideboard guide. If you are still loyal to Mono Blue, you can check out my sideboard guide for last month in October. The deck should play very similarly. Unfortunately, it just doesn't have any new tech. I never played with Storm Chase, Siren Storm Tamer. I think that would be the only new interesting addition to the deck. But yeah, like no other modifications. But the thing should still be very solid and still has a very similar idea about how to approach the current meta. But we're going to look at the Simic version because that's what I've been playing with. This is basically what I've been obliterating people with. I mean, with what you've seen on camera and a few games I've played off to the side, I have an 85% win percentage. It's very, very high. I'm going to talk about my opinion between Simic and Mono Blue tomorrow, but let's get into the deck tech. So the mana base, I'm changing it a little bit between the first version I've had of this deck and the latest version. Just to be conservative, I don't like to be greedy. I really don't like to be greedy. We're going to play with one Cavernous Souls. I understand that Blue Eye Control is out there. I understand that, Chalice of the Void is out there. It's sort of annoying, even if Eldrazi Tron plays Chalice of the Void on 2. It can hurt us. So having Cavern of Souls in our deck does help us combat that. But I'm playing with Natural State in the sideboard, and Cavern of Souls is a liability if I really need the green sources. And believe me, you do want those green sources. So play more conservatively with your mana base, and that's what I'm doing with Cavern of Souls. I see no reason not to play the full 4 Mutavault. I've seen a lot of lists tinker with like 3, 2, 1. Like I see no reason not to play the full 4. I think we have enough green sources and Ether Vial to cast all the green spells and green creatures. And Mutavault, like if you take Mutavaults out of your deck, you're actually just decreasing your win percentage against the entire field. Mutavault is just a good card against everything, and even though we're a 2-color deck, it's still great. So yeah, 4 Botanical Sanctum, because it's like the perfect dual land, and it will also help you a lot in the mirror, cards like Botanical Sanctum, which is popping up a lot. Like Merfolk has exploded in Modern. I'm facing this mirror match like pretty often. Simic Merfolk is pretty popular. So the Botanical Sanctum is going to be very good against the mirror. Cavern of Souls is also going to be good against the mirror. Let's talk about the fetch lands. In a theoretical perfect world, you want to diversify your fetch lands. I'm playing 5 of them with 2 of one and then 1 of all the other ones. So I have 2 Flood Strands here, 1 Misty Rainforest, 1 Polluted Delta, 1 Scalding Tarn. But that is just to play around Pithing Needle. To be realistic, it's not really going to happen. You can play with any of the fetch lands you want. This is just a theoretical perspective. Like if someone thought not to on turn 2, sees that you've got like 2 or 3 of one fetch land that you haven't played, and then on their next turn they play Pithing Needle and nail that one card. You protect yourself completely by diversifying the fetch lands, but you don't have to. It's really a minuscule advantage. In the raw dollars, it is not going to make a difference. So if you want, you can play 3 Polluted Delta and 2 Flooded Strand, because we're only fetching islands. There are no other types of land that we can get. We're only going to grab like the 3 island and the 2 breeding pool in the deck. So any combination of blue fetch lands will do if you want to save some money in your wallet. We are playing with the 4 Kumena Speaker, and believe me, the 4 Kumena Speaker, this is the all-star of the deck. This is what really made the deck so much better than... the core of the deck got better because of Kumena Speaker. This is a very good 1-drop. That extra 1 power makes a big difference. Getting too big to be blocked by a lot of creatures on the earlier turns of the game. And then like with 2 Lords out, it's a 4/4 creature. It outclasses a ton of Modern. Very, very strong, very powerful. Even just 2 Kumena Speakers on the board and 1 Lord, that's 6 power on the board that can be unblockable against a lot of decks. Or, I mean, like, even if they don't have islands, we can Spreading Seas them. 6 damage a turn is very, very strong. Nothing even close to Curse Catcher. But remember, I'm playing with Curse Catcher. We still have 2 Curse Catchers in the deck because I want to have enough 1-drops in the deck to be able to still churn out those turn 4 victories. Like Kumena Speaker helps out. I'm winning more on turn 4 than I ever did. Or even if I'm not winning on turn 4, I'm threatening. I'm like literally threatening to kill you on turn 4 unless you do something, putting a lot of our opponents on the defensive. The deck is just so much like more streamlined, more consistent, and less clunky than ever before, and I want to have that. And Curse Catcher is still a very useful card against a wide range of decks. We saw how it worked against Storm. It did great against Storm, so we need the Curse Catcher. So, and we're going to play with 4 Silvergill Adepts, 4 Merfolk Branchwalker, so we have 8 Silvergill Adepts now in the deck. Branchwalker, basically either a big beater plus a scry, or it draws us a card like Silvergill Adept would. 4 Harbinger of the Tides. So I should say, this deck, main and sideboard, is not going to have any removal. I know a lot of people, and I could be wrong about this, I know a lot of people are, they want to play with Dismember or some sort of spot removal, but I don't know if that's so necessary. Like, we can just attack with some creatures and force our opponent to trade because we're, like, threatening lethal. Harbinger and I think Mara Regery are enough to get through creatures, and, okay, Harbinger, Mara Regery, and Spreading Seas should be enough to get through creatures in order to bring in victory. Like, it's not a slow mid-range deck where we try to stabilize, play Master of Waves, and try to win. We're going to be on the offensive more often than not, and that will usually put our opponent at a low life total, to a point where, you know, any Mara Regery triggers can kill them by just tapping some creatures. So I'm less inclined to have like something like Dismember. So this is basically on my removal, the Harbinger of the Tides and the Mara Regeries. And we've got all our Lords, we need the Lords, and 3 Phantasmal Image because it's just well positioned. I think there's still enough decks in the meta that force you to try to win very early, like Titan Shift, and Phantasmal Image is just more Lords for that matter. And we've got 4 Aether Vial and 4 Spreading Seas. And looking into the sideboard, we're going to play with 3 Disdainful Stroke, 3 Dispel. Now, Disdainful Stroke, it's for Titan Shift. You can counter a Primeval Titan. And Scape Shift all in one. It's good against Storm, countering Past in Flames and Gifts Ungiven. It's good against Blue Eye Control, counter all the counter spells, Cryptic Command, Sphinx's Revelation, Elspeth, you know, all the Planeswalkers, so very strong there. A pretty versatile card. I mean, he hits a lot of Eldrazi targets, and even though the Eldrazi might be uncounterable, you can still counter a hanger... an All Is Dust, or they can't name everything with Cavernous Souls, so you can get a Walking Ballista with Disdainful Stroke when they cast it for 4 or 6. Dispel, just like probably the best position card I think in the sideboard. So many, like against all the Coco decks, you just want to have as many Dispels as possible. If I could, I would have a 4th one in here. I think it's just so well positioned in Modern right now. 3 Ceremonious Rejection. It's going to be useful against all the Tron decks, Eldrazi Tron. Not going to be bringing it in against Affinity because of the 3 Natural State, so I don't know what this card's super purpose in the sideboard is, but to be honest, like in a lot of the games that we saw, I wasn't even bringing in a lot of cards. So, you know, this is just the list that I have been playing, but historically, Ceremonious Rejection was very, very strong against Eldrazi Tron, against regular Tron. Very strong card. We already have a good advantage against them, and we lock that advantage in with Ceremonious Rejection. And 3 Relic of Progenitus, good against Tarmogoyf decks, Snapcaster Mage decks, good against combo decks like Storm. And the Natural State is the new tech. Just something we're trying out. It's not mandatory, and if this card isn't good enough, I'm willing to dump it so that we have a more streamlined mana base with Cavernous Souls, and I just don't have to worry about green cards in the sideboard, and I'm not sure, maybe there's some other way to adjust the deck in the main deck. But Natural State is going to be for Affinity, and you're going to see it has a little bit of application like Eldrazi and Taxes. You can hit a Tidehellow Sculler and an Aether Vial. What else? We'll see. It has some playability against Ad Nauseam as well. Let's go back to the mana base. Actually, a lot of people are like pushing to me in the comments section. Do you want Nikachu? All I need is like 8 green sources and I'm good. No, no, you're not. That is not going to work at all. Not if you have green cards in your sideboard. I understand that, yeah, maybe you've play tested and it's worked for you, but I've been playing this game for 4 years and I'm telling you, 8 cards in your, like 8 mana sources is not enough. Like, you're gonna get them, most of the time, I would say. But like, what's most? Like 60% of the time you should have them. But there's going to be this really large chunk of games where you just don't have your colored source of mana. So I'm really heavily against the like 4 Mutavault, 4 Cavern of Souls, and a bunch of unclaimed territory plan. And not only that, you're going to be lacking blue sources. Let me just say this. At 12 blue sources in Legacy, there is a good chunk of games I never draw an island. And I have this Flusterstorm in my hand and I can't cast it. And that's not a huge problem in Legacy because we can still depend on Chalice of the Void, which is colorless, and we can also pitch blue spells away with Force of Will in our hand, so it's not a big deal. So I would say 13 blue sources to cast counter spells post-board would be like the iffy breaking point, and at 12 I know for sure that there's going to be a good chunk of games where I'm not going to be able to cast my counter spells. And that's at 12. That's at 12 lands. So anything below that, you're just driving up the variance of like, or you're just driving up the games that you don't have the mana to cast your spells. And the last thing I want to say about this is like 13 was my like breaking point where, it was like the moment where I can feel like I'm gonna have some games where I don't have the mana. Not too often, but it's gonna start happening at 13. I don't know how Merfolk Branchwalker plays in all this. I have a feeling that it would help us a little bit be more consistent because it looks for more lands. It will draw us more lands. And yeah, so maybe that 13 turns into 12, but it's not going to go to 8 or 9 or even 10. It still feels just way too low. So if you've got green cards in your sideboard, even if you have counter spells in your sideboard, try to have at least 12. For the counter spells, have at least 12 sources. And then for like, I understand I have 11 sources here for green, but I don't need to cast Natural State on turn 1. I can cast it anywhere between turn 3 and 4, and against I think the entire field of decks that I'm playing against. So, but there are some cards that you do really want really early, maybe on turn 1. Maybe you need that blue mana for Ceremonious Rejection. Maybe you need that blue mana really early for Dispel. So I understand I'm playing with 11 green sources, but I think we can make it work. But it's close. It's iffy. Natural State might not work. It might not. It might be the wrong plan. Maybe we should just be playing mono blue with a bunch of green creatures. Okay, moving on. We're gonna go with the sideboard guide. So Eldrazi-tron, we're gonna take out 1 Ether Vial because they're gonna bring in Pithing Needle against us, and we want to remove some of the Pithing Needle targets. Ether Vial is a good card, but not amazing. It's not perfect. I don't want to have like multiple Ether Vials against Pithing Needle. That really sucks. I'm gonna take out 1 Phantasmal Image. Image is a powerful card, but it is vulnerable in this matchup. I mean, you could argue to take them all out because of Walking Ballista can just shoot it down just at 1 target. 1 counter, shoot your Phantasmal Image instead. But Phantasmal Image can copy their Thought-Knot Seer, their Reality Smasher, their you copy your own lords. Having a bunch of lords is very important in this matchup. So it has a lot of upside. You can also get shot down by Endbringer, but you can also copy their Endbringer end of turn, maybe attack for 5. So there is a lot of situations where Phantasmal Image can do a lot of good things, but it is definitely vulnerable. So be very careful about how you play your Phantasmal Image in this matchup. Going to take out Cursecatcher. Cursecatcher, in the grand scheme of things, is pretty poor. Late game, if your opponent doesn't have Tron, then you can slow them down from playing All Is Dust. But in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty weak. It's very small. Commander Speaker, I wouldn't mind having more of these things in, but I didn't know what to take out. You could say maybe you're supposed to take out the Phantasmal Image, because Commander Speaker is still a pretty big body very early on. And it's nice to have things that are not converted mana cost 2, because Ratchet Bomb just sweeps up more things like that. But we're going to take out the Commander Speaker, and we're going to bring in Ceremonious Rejection and Natural State. Now, what does Natural State hit? It hits Ratchet Bomb, which is like the single biggest bomb that they can bring in against us. And occasionally, if Pithing Needle is such a big deal, we can blow that up too. But yeah, Ratchet Bomb is a big deal. Sometime you can destroy a Walking Ballista. Of course, they're going to throw all the counters at you, but at least you get it off the board. If they have got a lot of mana, then they can, turn after turn, just keep putting counters on it and then eventually wipe your whole board out or kill you at the same time. So Natural State has application in this matchup, and you can even destroy like a Expedition map if it looks necessary. And Ceremonious Rejection is such a very good card. Counters All Is Dust, counters the Eldrazi if they aren't cast off of Cavern of Souls, counters Walking Ballista. Counters like everything. Ceremonious Rejection is just 1 mana counter something from Eldrazi-tron. So against Affinity, we're going to bring in the Natural States. It's basically 1 mana destroy anything from Affinity. And we're going to take out Curse Catcher. It's just basically a 1 blue, 1/1 poor card, and we're going to take out a Merfolk Branchwalker. So Affinity is a matchup where card advantage doesn't matter as much as power. I always had this theory on, like, if you were against elves, would you want unlimited lords or unlimited Silvergill Adepts on the board? What's more important, card advantage or the power? And the answer in my mind was the power, but I never had a sideboard where I brought in so many cards that eventually I would have to take out the Silvergill Adepts. But now we have 8 Silvergill Adept effects, and so now we're going to be taking them out when necessary. So against Affinity, we want the Lords. The Lords are very important. It helps us race. So I don't know which one's weaker, though. I don't know if it's Merfolk Branchwalker or if it's Silvergill Adept. That's going to take a lot of time to discover, because Branchwalker could be better than Silvergill Adept because Branchwalker can get bigger. But against a lot of decks where you might be dead with cards in your hand, you're going to want to be siding out some of these Silvergill Adept effects out. So yeah, we're going to take out a Branchwalker here. So against Grixis Death Shadow, we're going to bring in 3 Dispel, 3 Relic of Progenitus, and we're going to take out 4 Aether Vial because this is an attrition-based matchup. Yeah, post-board it's going to be an attrition-based matchup. Game 1, they like Dirtle a lot, but post-board they're going to bring in tons of removal. We want the relics to deal with Gurmag Angler, to deal with Tasigur, to deal with Snapcaster Mage, in some effects deal with Liliana the Last Hope so they can't take something nice from the graveyard. And Dispel counters basically everything that they have. Yeah, so we're going to take out the Aether Vial, and we're going to take out the 2 Spreading Seas. Leaving 2 Spreading Seas in, sometimes it's fine. You just mana screw them, you cantrip, no big deal. One thing to note about taking out Aether Vial is that we don't have a ton of green sources in the deck. We have like 12 sources of land. I think we can cast our green creatures. So by taking out all the Aether Vials, we'll be a little bit slower with the green creatures. We might have to wait to draw the lands in order to cast them, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be fine. But don't count the Commander Speaker as a 1-drop. Maybe look at it as like a 2-drop or a 3-drop. It's just you're going to have to be more patient. And in a matchup like this where it goes long, that's not going to be a big deal. It would be nice to be able to play a Commander Speaker on turn 1 and start beating in, but, we've got to get rid of these Aether Vials. Against Abzan, same story. We're going to bring in 3 relics, but in this case we're dealing with Tarmogoyfs and Grim Flares and Lingering Souls. And 1 Dispel that can counter Path to Exile and Fatal Push, and we're going to take out all the Aether Vials. Against Burn, on the play, we're going to want to bring in the Dispel and take out Phantasmal Image. I'm not sure what I want to take out. All of it's good, so I just took out the Phantasmal Image. And on the draw, we're going to bring in Dispel. We're going to take out Spreading Seas. On the draw, Spreading Seas is so much worse. You can very easily, just fall way far behind when they play, Creature Attack. You play a land, they play another creature attack, bolt you, and then on your turn 2 you play Spreading Seas. You're just getting completely tempoed out. So I think Spreading Seas on the draw against Burn is not where you want to be, and you might as well just side them out and bring in the Dispels. Against Death and Taxes, this is the mono white version, just no changes. I think the deck is perfectly fine as it is. We have nothing really to bring in, but all you want is a really creature-dense deck against them. Be careful with Phantasmal Image. Hold it in your hand for as long as possible, for so long as your opponent has cards in their hand. Phantasmal Image definitely gets stronger the later the game goes against Death and Taxes for two reasons. If your opponent's playing with Eldrazi Displacer, they can just snipe the thing down, and they all play Flicker Wisp, which can also kill the Phantasmal Image. So if your opponent's hand is empty, you know that the coast is clear, that you can copy anything you want, and then get in for the win or whatever. Whereas early in the game, you have so little information, and there's like less good things to copy on the board that I think you want to wait as long as possible against Death and Taxes decks, or any deck with Flicker Wisp for that matter, to get the maximum value out of Phantasmal Image. Yeah, so we're keeping one Phantasmal Image. Sorry, okay, there's no changes for Death and Taxes, but for Eldrazi and Taxes, I want to bring in that Natural State because it can hit an Ether Vial, and it can also hit Tidehallow Sculler, and it will... yeah, that's about it. I don't want to bring in too many, because it can get too clunky. It doesn't have that many targets. Ceremonious Rejection in the same boat. It has enough targets. Aether Vial, Wasteland Strangler, Eldrazi Displacer, Thought-Knot Seer. But they see your hand pretty frequently, sometimes with like Inquisition of Kozilek, but most importantly Tidehallow Sculler, Thought-Knot Seer. And if they see the Ceremonious Rejection, they're going to play around it really perfectly. So I don't want to be too dependent on it. I'm just going to bring in two. Curse Catch is usually pretty poor. And Phantasmal Image is like, I don't know where it stands in this matchup, but I'm just not even going to try with it. So Merfolk, we're going to bring in one Natural State, take out one Spreading Seas. Actually, I think the Seas is pretty okay in this matchup, because against a lot of the Simic builds, they're going to have a lot of non-land cards. There's a lot of Simic builds just playing with like a ton of Cavern of Souls and Unclaimed Territory, so depending on the matchup, you want to bring in more Spreading Seas, but Natural State can blow up your opponent's Spreading Seas on you, or their Ether Vial. Against any green, white, or Bant Company decks, I mean, they're playing with Collected Company, so we're going to bring in Dispel. Curse Catcher is pretty weak because they have Matadorks, and we'll take out one Harbinger of the Tides. A lot of these, at least Bant Company, has a lot of creatures like Spell Queller or Reflector Mage. When they enter the battlefield, they have some sort of effect, so you don't want to be bouncing those cards back to their hand. So Jund, in a very similar vein as Abzan, we're going to bring in Relic for Tarmogoyf, Grimflare. I have Dispel because they've got Bolt, Fatal Push, Kolaghan's Command, and we're going to take out the Ether Vial because it's also an attrition-based matchup. Against humans, no changes. The deck is fine. It's just creatures versus creatures, and I think we're quite advantaged. We have our own Ether Vial. Harbinger of the Tides is a huge beating. Spreading Seas helps break any like board stall. What else? Maraudgery can also break board stalls. So I think we have a very good matchup against humans. If you want like extra help, probably Gutshot is the card to do it. Against Boggles, for once we actually have a real card to side in. Natural State is good against them. Blow up any of their auras. Bring in one Dispel because they're going to bring in some number of Paths and Dismembers against you, and we can take out the Curse Catchers and the Harbinger of the Tides. They're just meaningless cards. Although, like, two Harbinger of the Tides will still be useful against Core Spirit Dancer. So against normal Tron, we're going to bring in 3 Ceremonious Rejections, 3 Disdainful Strokes. That's something Tron is good against Tron. And we're going to take out 2 Curse Catchers and 4 Harbinger of the Tides. Against Blood Control, we're going to bring in 3 Dispel, 3 Disdainful Stroke, and I'll take out 2 Curse Catcher and 4 Spreading Seas. Spreading Seas is like just not ideal, because if you play enough Spreading Seas, they can just sweep them all up with a Detention Sphere. You can't reliably cut them off any mana. It's nice to be able to hit one of the Colonnades, but long term they're just going to remove them. Smallpox, no changes. 8-Rack, no changes. This is the first build that I've have so few changes against so many decks. Like, the main deck is already perfect. I don't have to do anything. Lantern Control, we are probably still screwed against this deck, but you know what? Maybe Natural State can help us out. So we're going to bring in the 3 Natural State, 2 Relics. Relic helps eat up their graveyard just in case they dump cards in their graveyard to look for an Ensnaring Bridge and then put it back on top of their deck with Academy Runes. Also, you can snap a card off the top of your deck in response to a milling effect. Natural State, of course, hits Ensnaring Bridge. the card that is the most disastrous from Merfolk. Take out Harbinger of the Tides and 1 Spreading Seas. So for Titan Shift, we're going to bring in 3 Disdainful Stroke, 3 Dispel, 1 Natural State. I don't want to bring in too many Natural States, but it has enough targets. It can hit a Colony Heart Expedition, but that it can hit Prismatic Omen, and it can hit an Engineered Explosives. Now, Prismatic Omen is a great target, but they don't have many copies of it. Colony Heart Expedition is a great target, but they can play around it by playing it late and then just playing lands and then in response to something fetch and then get enough cards and then sack it. And then also with Engineered Explosives, they can just play it on 2 with the 2 mana up already. So it's sort of soft. I don't want to bring too many natural states in, but I think it's playable. I think one is enough that is playable. Dispel will counter Lightning Bolt, but most importantly Summoner's Pact, and Disdainful Stroke hits to Primal Titan and the Scape Shift. Take out Spreading Seas. Spreading Seas I don't think is that bad in this matchup. I just didn't know what else to take out. I want to keep all my lords. And I took out Harbinger of the Tides because this thing is... balancing a Primeval Titan not only is ambitious, but it probably is not going to work. Or, like, if the Primeval Titan is in play, the damage is done. So for Storm, we are bringing 3 Dispel, 3 Relic of Progenitus, 3 Disdainful Stroke. So the Dispel hits the most important cards like Gifts Ungiven, basically just Gifts Ungiven. In a pinch, you can hit like a... they'll bring in Lightning Bolt if you really need to counter that. You can counter the Rituals or Metamorphose if you really need to. You think it like stops the game right on the spot. Relic is really powerful because they rely on their graveyard. Gifts Ungiven for cards to put in their graveyard. Past in Flames requires the graveyard, so it's really it's the best card actually. It's better than the Dispel. And Disdainful Stroke hits Gifts Ungiven and Past in Flames, so it's got the okay with me. Spreading Seas is totally useless. They play with islands, and Phantasmal Image is just very vulnerable to Grape Shot. Yeah, they just hit it for 1, then it's dead. And 2 Harbinger of the Tides. Harbinger is just not very useful in this matchup. Against Counters Company, I think we're going to have a really bad game because we don't have... Well, I mean, Dispel is going to help a lot, but it would be nice to have like a little bit more than that. But we're going to bring in the Dispel. We'll take out 2 Curse Catcher because the Mana Dorks are just going to... they'll have like too much mana. The Curse Catcher's not that mandatory. And I'm going to take out 1 Merfolk Branchwalker, and because I don't think cards matter that much in this matchup. What you really want are lords and maybe some tempo effects. So card advantage not so important. And I think if you see the Finks combo, you can bring in 3 more relics and take out 3 Branchwalkers. Against Infect, we're just going to bring in 3 Dispel, take out 3 Phantasmal Image. Phantasmal Image just die to everything, any pump spell, anything. It's really fragile. It's barely playable. Against Ad Nauseam, we've got 3 Dispel, counter Ad Nauseam itself, because that's the only thing that matters. Disdainful Stroke also counters Ad Nauseam. We're going to bring in 2 Natural States. Natural State can hit Phyrexian on life. You can also hit their Pentad Prisms, and maybe in a rare situation you can hit the Lotus Bloom, cut them off mana when they are not ready to combo off. So I think Natural State is quite good. I don't think it's not super amazing that I want all 3, but I think 2 is fine, and I'm willing to pass on Phantasmal Image for Harbinger of the Tides and 1 Spreading Seas. So this was my only adjustment from the sideboard guide from earlier, so I hope you've made the correction. Before I was taking out Merfolk Branchwalker and leaving in Phantasmal Image, but I think card advantage and digging for counterspells is more important than having lords in this matchup. So against Elves, we'll bring in 3 Dispel, take out 2 Curse Catcher, 1 Merfolk Branchwalker. Against Dredge, we're going to bring in 3 Relic, take out 3 Phantasmal Image. It's vulnerable to Conflagrate, so I don't want it. And Living End will bring in 3 Relic, take out 3 Phantasmal Image. And that's it. That's it. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. I hope that was some help to you. Thanks to all my patrons that support me on Patreon. Thanks to all my subscribers who subscribe to me on YouTube. All you guys who comment and support the channel. You support the channel, I'm going to support you with the sideboard guides. So this has been Nikachu with the sideboard guide. The Tropical Merfolk sideboard guide for November 2017.